Thanks for tuning in. This is TJ Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Adventurous Entrepreneurs. My guest today is Gary Ross. From his early days penning for his high school newspaper to becoming an Emmy-nominated broadcast journalist, Gary's journey in storytelling is nothing short of captivating. But his prowess doesn't stop there. As a former Fortune 500 corporate executive, Gary knows the intricacies of communicating from the C-suite down to the production line. Now, as a sought-after communication trainer, coach, and consultant, he collaborates with a diverse clientele, from titans in the Fortune 500 to dynamic nonprofits, guiding them through the realms of corporate transformations, mergers and acquisitions, and change communication. His 10 number one rules of communication have revolutionized the way professionals interact, and he's here to share insights that could transform the trajectory of your business and your career. Just a few of the golden takeaways Gary shares in this episode are navigating disruptions with effective communication plans, the importance of targeted impact over broad attempts, understanding and embracing the limits of control, rallying teams behind a unified vision of success, and recognizing that every decision communicates. So, without further ado, this is me and Gary Ross. Welcome to the Adventurous Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, TJ Murphy. Since quitting my corporate 9-to-5 and starting a business while backpacking through Asia back in early 2017, I've had the privilege of learning from some incredibly adventurous entrepreneurs. Through these conversations and my own journey, I've learned that much like in life, entrepreneurship is an adventure. On this podcast, I explore the journeys of top-performing leaders in their fields. These wide-ranging conversations include tactical business advice, how I built this insights, lessons in leadership, life hacks, travel stories, favorite hobbies, and insights into living a purposeful and joy-filled life. Adventures await us, so let's dive in. Hey, Gary, welcome to Adventurous Entrepreneurs.
Hey, TJ, thanks for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Been looking forward to this conversation, and I'd really love to kick things off by digging into a quote you sent me in preparation for this conversation, which was, "I learned early on that I cannot boil the ocean, but I can make a difference. And that's what fuels me." I felt like there was a story to be told there. So I'm curious if you can elaborate on that and also just share what making a difference means to you.
Yeah, making a difference. What that means to me is that things have turned out better than they would have if I wasn't there. And that really is what it comes down to. When I started in my consulting career, I went in and I thought, all right, well, I'll go in and just fix everything, and then I leave and everybody will be happy and we'll move on. And I learned early on that you cannot fix everything. And there are certain things that you should look at and pick out and say, okay, if I'm able to make a difference here in this particular spot, then this assignment will have been a success. And that's what I learned early on in my career, and or in my consulting career, and I keep that with me today as well, because there are some things that are a little bit beyond our control. There are some things within our control. We focus on what's in our control, and at the end of the day, if things are better because we were there, then that's a win.
That's definitely making a difference in my book too. So you alluded to your consulting career, but again, in preparation, you had mentioned that you've been a storyteller for your whole career, from writing for your high school newspaper to becoming an Emmy-nominated broadcast journalist, and now, helping companies tell stories to external and internal audiences. And I'm curious, is there any moment or person, maybe, a moment or person would be relevant, but that really helped inspire that passion for storytelling? Or has that just been something you've been interested in all along?
I don't remember what it was that caused me to start wanting to start right for my high school newspaper. And I went and I did it, and I had a fun time writing this feature article. I don't remember offhand actually what it was, but I do remember turning it in, and they loved it so much and they didn't make any changes to it, and they published it as is. And I thought, oh,
Impressive.
well, maybe I can do this. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And I tried it a couple of more times, and that happened. And it's like, all right, I think I've got a knack for this. And that's when I grew into that excitement of telling stories, being able to inform people, move people with stories and the great things that help, that within stories that help take us places, that help us buy into a notion, to get excited about something, to want to follow along with a quest or a journey. That's what stories are about. And doing that is a lot of fun, and continue to do that to this day.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. I'd love to bring things forward to how you're helping clients learn to tell their own stories. So what's going on here in September 23? What has your focus right now, and how are you helping people?
So workplace communication training, and so that helps people communicate better at work with each other, with people outside their organization as well. There's been some research done that says poor communication at work can cost an organization $12,500 a year per employee. So per employee per year, 12,500.
It's a
Due
big
to
chunk
poor
of change.
communication. That is a big chunk of change. Depending on and poor communication, that's when there's confusion involved. People have to reiterate themselves, or things get lost, and so forth, and it kind of gums up the works. And so there's real money involved in this. It also goes toward employee engagement and people sticking around and giving their full effort at work, and so forth. So workplace communication, to me, and it always seemed like everybody knows that they need better workplace communication, but they're not sure how to go about getting it. And that's where I come in. So I teach courses, I work alongside and coach executives and also managers and even frontline employees as well, on how to express themselves, how to inform people, how to influence people, how to inspire people as well. And that helps the organization. It also helps individuals in their careers also. So things like professional communication, showing up professionally at work, things like eliminating filler words or reducing filler words, saying and ah a lot less, how to have a difficult conversation, these sorts of things.
Yeah, and communication is obviously so fundamental to any role in business, whether you're sending an email, whether you're selling from stage, whether you're selling over the phone, through your social media, whatever the case or the medium might be. As you said, there's a lot of money on the table when you do things
Well,
poorly.
right, and especially for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs' dreams of building a business. You've got an idea up here. You've got a dream, a picture of success. And a big key to making that happen is to have other people understand what your vision is, and then to rally behind the vision so they can act on it and bring that vision to reality. And that's where the storytelling comes in, because storytelling is one of those things where, as human beings, our brains are wired to respond emotionally to stories. And it's how we've been communicating for years and years, if you think back to the cavemen. The cool thing is there are certain storytelling formats that have been tested through time that we can adapt into a business standpoint, into a business environment. One way to do that is to ask ourselves 4 questions, and the answers to each of these questions generate our story. The 4 questions are: where are we now? Where are we going? How will we get there? And what will it look like when we get there? So instead of just communicating a dry piece of information and telling people what to do, when we answer those 4 questions and give people a sense of, okay, here's where we are now, and some change has to happen. Here's where we're going. This is what we're going to be doing, and how are we going to get there? These are the things that we're going to be doing to make that journey. And so we're going to go on a quest, or we're going to go on a trip together, and I want you to come along with me. And at the end, this is what it's going to look like. This is the picture of success, why everything is going to be better if we go on this journey, we go on this quest together. So where are we now? Where are we going? What will it, or how will we get there? And what will it look like when we get there? If you think about some famous stories or movies that you love, a lot of them follow that simple 4-question format. My favorite example is The Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we now? We're stuck in Oz. Where are we going? We're off to see the wizard. How are we going to get there? We're going to follow the yellow brick road. And by the way, we got to get past the Wicked Witch of the West and the winged monkeys and all that stuff. And so that's where
Yeah.
the conflict and the journey comes in. What will it look like when we get there? There's no place like home, and all the positive emotions that go with that. So Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, you can look back to Shakespeare. They all follow this very similar arc. And the cool thing is we can use the same sequence that has captivated people's imaginations for centuries, use them in a business setting, and get people to follow us along and get people bought in and inspired by those stories.
Yeah, it makes me, immediately think of the hero's journey, which is a lens that I like to look at a lot of problems through, whether it's helping a client in business, whether it's this podcast. And, even thinking about your story, I imagine there are some communication challenges that you faced personally that have helped you develop this expertise in the system for helping people to become better storytellers and leverage that in their lives and their businesses and the corporations that they work for. So what are, or do any come to mind, challenges that you faced throughout your journey, and how did you overcome them?
One of my favorite stories. I was leading communications for CDW, a technology products and services company, and the company had been a publicly traded company. It had gone public 14 years prior to this particular point in time that I'm talking about. And when the founder took the company public, he gave everybody stock options.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a way for people to actually be invested in the company, but also people would track the stock price to see, okay, how are we doing? Well, this particular point in time, the 14 years after the company went public, the company decided to sell itself to private equity and go private, which was going to rock everybody's world because everybody had stock options. They were used to this stock price, and then people were going to get paid for their options. But other than that, that stuff was going to go away. And we knew this was going to be really, really disruptive and generate a lot of anxiety, what's going to happen to the company and all of that. And so the CEO kind of brought me under the tent and he says, here's what's going on. And we need you to put together a communication plan to keep everybody engaged and focused on productivity, because we're about to have these new owners. We can't have the company go sink someplace and take a nosedive. So we put together a communication plan that focused on just that, on providing people with as much information as we could by telling them the story about what's happening and where we're going and how we're going to get there and all of that. And we had executive visibility, a lot of different communication channels and so forth. The announcement was made, and 48 hours after the announcement was made and after we executed our communication plan, the company had its fourth largest sales day in the history of the company. Wow. And the CEO attributed the communication plan to helping sustain the levels of success and productivity that the company had, even as it was going through this jarring and disruptive period. So that's one of my favorite stories to tell, because I think it shows the power of good workplace communication at a time where it can help a company and its people stay successful and engaged at a time of peril and uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a great story. Do you happen to remember, like, going through that framework that you described? Where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what will it look like? Do you have at least cliff notes on how you built that into this conversation?
I probably have my notes buried someplace
no worries,
on that. And I don't know if I had used that particular format at the time.
Okay.
I probably wish I did.
Yeah.
It might have been.
Well, hey, it seemed like it worked out just fine anyway. So,
but yeah, it did.
How did you communicate that message on that scale to the entire company? Was that an email? Was that a big meeting? What did that look like?
Oh, a lot of different communication channels. So you want to go to where people are and where they're used to getting their information and where they like to get information. And studies have shown that people like getting their information direct from their direct manager as a trustworthy source. And so we would equip leaders as soon as we were able to bring them in on this, give them information that they could have to talk to their folks about. We also made our executives very visible through town hall, through conference call, this was before a lot of remote work. So the old MBWA, which is managing by walking around, we
Okay.
just had people visible in the office to ask questions and to show that, hey, nobody's running anywhere. It's still business as usual. And we promised something that I later started phrasing this way. We promised people clarity, not necessarily transparency. And there's a difference. We all have the urge to promise people transparency, that we're going to be totally transparent, but we can't. There are just certain things that we're not able to talk about for competitive reasons, for regulatory reasons, legal reasons, what have you. But you can promise people clarity. You can say, look, we will tell you everything we can when we're able to talk about it. And we'll make sure we follow up on questions that we're not able to answer at the time. We'll follow up on those questions later. And we also said and made sure we all understood. We kind of eyeballed each other around the table and said, look, we cannot say anything now that is not going to hold up later. We have to do what we say what we're going to do, because this is a time of a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of what we had to do was basically say, here's what we're going to do over time. We had no way to prove to people that we were going to do that. We just had to say, here's what's going to happen over time. And people kind of had to trust us at the beginning. But over time, if you fulfill what you say you're going to do, then that's what builds trust. And trust is that key number one factor that makes for a good workplace. You look at the Fortune magazine 100 best companies to work for list. It's all about trust. And those companies outperform others because they're great workplaces. So we had to establish as best we could, although it took time, and we all realized it took time, that sense of trust. And over time we did, and that's what helped us in the long run.
Yeah. And it sounds like it, really boiled down to distinguishing, being clear. Of course, you cannot always be transparent, but in the things that you're clear on as a team, as a leadership team, having that understanding from the beginning that no matter what we are clear about, we have to follow through on, because that's what builds trust. And that's what's going to create the stability that's going to get us through this major transition, which could be very tumultuous.
Yeah, you got it. And the company went through its period as being a private company. It's now publicly traded again. It came out of its private period, and they're, it's been a good story for that company. So it's overall it's gone, it went well, and I think it's a real communication success story at a time of real uncertainty for the company and for the individuals there. And I think that's a touchstone of a lot of good workplace communication too. Is it serves the organization because you're getting a group of informed and engaged people working there, and it also helps the individuals working there who are walking in the door or flipping open their computers every morning. They know how their roles are connected to the organization. They know that they're being leveled with, even though sometimes the news might not be so great. At least, hey, they're leveling with me. And then they can go home at night, and when they're sitting at the table for dinner around with their family, they could say, look, here's what's happening at work, and here's how I'm connected into it, and here's what it means, and this is what we know now, this is what we don't know now, but they tell us they're going to follow up with us in a few months, and I trust them and believe them. And that's the kind of relationship you want to have with your workers, because that's where you'll get your productivity, that's where you get your loyalty, your turnover will go down. And again, you look back at some of the best performing or some of the companies with the best cultures, best workplace cultures, are some of the best performing companies. So it does go down to the bottom line. This is not all touchy feely, soft, all that kind of stuff. This means real money.
Yeah. Not all the woo woo stuff. So a bit of a segue, but I mean, boots on the ground. You're, from your experience in the corporate world, now helping to train in the corporate world, what are common communication challenges that you observe C-level executives making? Or, said differently, what are things that you see a lot of companies or executives getting wrong when it comes to how they're communicating, or how they're even developing a plan of action around how to communicate big challenges?
Yeah, one of the things that I see quite a bit is people not realizing that everything communicates. It's not only what you say and what you write and what you distribute out there, but it's also what you don't say.
Yeah.
It's also when you don't say anything. It also has to do with your actions, with your visibility. Like going back to that story, the fact that those executives were physically in the building or physically in our offices, and we made sure we deployed certain people to certain places on that day. Just them showing up is an act of communication.
Yeah.
And their visibility. They were not running away during a day that was could have been a little testy. They were there. There's a tendency for folks to wait until they feel they're 100% ready to communicate. And what can happen there, especially if it's a potentially sensitive issue, is if they don't communicate, then you develop, if you look at it from the employee's point of view, from a receiver-centric point of view, it's radio silence. They're not hearing anything.
That's when people start thinking the worst. All the worst case storytelling is happening in their heads.
Right. They make up their own stories, which are never as good as the real one. Yeah. And you're instantly putting yourself behind the 8 ball at that point if you're allowing that to happen. So understand the fact that everything communicates. I'll give you another story. Is a time where, this was not too long ago, I was working with a company where there was a group of, out of about 4,000 people, there was a group of about 1,200 people that were about to be affected by a leadership change. And the people that were communicating about this, they said, okay, we're going to be up front. We're going to, and it was a kind of a sensitive time for the entire company. But with these 1,200 people, we want to make sure, we're going to take care of them. We're going to inform them and allow them to ask questions, have a town hall for them. And they invited all these 1,200 people to certain offices and gather virtually online for this big meeting. What they didn't think about was the other 2,800 people in this part of the company. All they heard about was there was a meeting that was happening that they weren't invited to. Mm-hmm. And they started getting nervous, and rumors started spreading. And because there wasn't a culture of trust, they were like, oh, what's going on? I didn't get invited to the meeting. Did you get invited? No, I didn't get invited. What's going on? What aren't they telling us? Where back as they were making the decision, they thought they were out there communicating and doing the right thing. For those 1,200 people, they were. Yeah. But there were 2,800 people who felt alienated and confused. And, again, radio silence, the rumors start going and so forth. So understanding that everything communicates, that actions that you take generally will create a communication implication that needs to be dealt with. Yeah. One way or another, and considered one way or another. And that's what workplace communication training can do. It can kind of help you see around those corners.
I mean, really, from that story, especially, like needing to be able to take a bird's eye view, and no matter what the decision is around how you're communicating something, it's not just the person you're directly communicating it to, it's what everyone else is going to think, feel, or perceive based on that action, whether Absolutely. It's out there in the public or not. People are paying attention. As a leader, you got to know that you're always going to be in the spotlight. And when you make a decision like that, having that consideration on how it will affect the big picture seems from your experience to have been critical. So digging into that a little bit more, I believe you've developed something called the 10 number one rules of communication. So without giving away all your secrets, can you highlight a couple of these that you believe every entrepreneur should be aware of?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, we're out of time. No.
Gotta buy the book. No.
Well, actually, I've narrowed it down to 3 because 10 were kind of a little unwieldy. So I kind of folded all the concepts into 3 number one rules. And we've kind of touched on them already, one way or another. Well, 2 of them actually. Well, the 3 are tell them a story, and we've talked about storytelling. Another one is everything communicates. We just talked about that. The last one, which we should think about a little bit more or talk about a little bit more, is know your audience. And I know that sounds a little basic. Well, I know my audience. That's the 200 people over there in that office, and Bob and Jane run it, and they do a great job. And what else do I need to know? Well, you need to know what motivates them. You need to know, what do they want from you? What do you want from them? What else is going on in their work life, and to the extent appropriate, their personal lives as well. What's happening in the community where they're in, what's happening, what are other things that are happening in that particular office location. An audience could be people who are new to your organization, or people who have been there for a while, people in certain roles, people in certain office locations, as I just mentioned, and so forth. And understanding really what it is that motivates them, what you want from them, what they want from you. So, and then where they like to receive their communication and how they're best communicated with as well. So ultimately, you want to be able to communicate the right thing at the right time to the right people in the right way. And that's what knowing your audience gets you to. If you are out there communicating, and again, this sounds counterintuitive, but this happens all the time, where people are out there communicating something to the wrong group. When you're about to send something out, and you should understand, all right, who's going to be getting this? And are these people even equipped or in a role where they can act on what you want them to do? Should you be sending this to them now, or should you wait another month or 6 weeks or what have you? Maybe send them a little update now and then communicate further later on. I had an instance where somebody was rolling out a new technology system to a company. It was a large company, but only a handful of people really needed to know the information about it. And the rollout wasn't going to happen for another 8 months. But the person was so excited that they got this stuff approved, they wanted to send out an entire company-wide communication about it right then and there. And we were trying to tell them that, all right, look, 80% of the people who are getting this aren't going to know what to do with it. And by the way, you're 6 months too early. So when it comes time to communicate about it, people will have thought they've heard about it already, and it's out of their mind, and then they'll be all confused. He insisted on getting it out there. He got it all out there. People were confused. And when it came time to actually launch the new system, we were starting from negative territory because people thought they'd already heard about it, and so on. So he, at that point, or in that particular case, he didn't understand his audience. So really take a step back and say, is this something that people can act on? Do they need to know about this now? What's the best way to communicate to them? And am I communicating this even to the right people to begin with?
I love that. Got to know your audience. Holds true in marketing, it holds true in sales, it holds true in just communication in general.
Yeah.
So for the action takers that are listening, which there are many, can you provide like a tangible exercise, a book, a tip, a podcast that you love to listen to, something that they could implement right after this podcast to be able to enhance their communication skills? Could be something that you offer. I'm sure you've got some things you like to point people to.
Well, a few of the things that we've talked about here. So these 3 number 1 rules. So know your audience. So ask yourself those questions about your audience. What do you want from them? What do they want from you? What motivates them? How do you communicate the right thing to the right people at the right time in the right way? Ask yourself those questions. On the other rule, everything communicates. Look at the actions that you're taking, and realize that you may be sending a message that you don't really know that you're sending. Tell them a story. Use that 4-question template. Where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What will it look like when we get there? I do have 11 e-learning courses on workplace communication on my website, plus.insidecoms.com, that covers a lot of this. The courses, their communications people have taken them. People outside communications have taken them. I have a client that's purchased 4 of them for their entire company.
Awesome.
And they've made them available for their corporate university and so forth. And so we do that. We can do deep discounts for teams that want to buy these. We also do custom e-learnings as well for anybody who's interested in that. So check that out again, awesome. plus.insidecoms.com. But those are some of the key things to do. One thing that applies, I think, to any kind of communication, and you actually even touched on it briefly, and what you said earlier. This applies to you're doing a presentation, even a one-on-one conversation, or a small meeting. When you go into a communication of any kind, think about your communication objective. What is the job of your communication? What do you want your communication to accomplish? Why are you communicating to begin with? Stay focused on the answer to that question, and that'll make sure you're not digressing in 100 different places and going down different tangents. Then think to yourself, what do I want people to think, feel, and do as a result of my communication? And the funny thing is, a lot of times we do the think and the feel part pretty well. The think is the core information we're communicating. The feel is how do we want people to feel? We want them to get excited, bought in, feel like they're being listened to, feel like they're optimistic about what they're hearing, they're excited about what they're hearing, they want to be a part of what they're hearing, and so forth. And then we kind of leave it at that, and we don't actually tell folks what it is that we need them specifically to do to achieve whatever it is that we're communicating about. So the one example there is we've all seen that email that comes out sometimes around toward the end of the year that says, hey, we need 5% more sales to finish our year strong in our goal. And we've got the best team in the business and I know we can do it. So finish the year strong. So I've got the think part in there on the sales data. And I've got the feel about, right. And I've got the feel about, okay, I'm in, what do I do? And then we forget to tell people, what do I actually do? And so I get that email, I turn to my manager and I say, well, what do we do? And the manager says, I don't know. I got the same email you did. And nothing happens. So, and we've all seen that stuff. So make sure that you're being prescriptive about what it is you would like people to do as a result of your communication. And sometimes it might feel like you're being a little too prescriptive, but that's natural. People need that information.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've had that even within, a recent company that I was supporting. They had a goal they wanted to hit. They sent out a similar email, and I prompted them to actually add in, one little detail. It's like, go find that customer that you felt like you've had on the hook for, the last few weeks. They're right there. Go just give them a call and check in on them. Don't even bring up business. Just call them up. And if you can do that, if everybody can do that one task and call up, we're going to get a couple sales out of that. It's just that relationship building at the end of the day. So
I think one of the challenges that I have sometimes is that a lot of this communication stuff that we talk about does feel pretty intuitive to people and feels familiar to people, yet we fall down on this stuff every day. And you see it in organizations big and small. And so part of what I do when I'm out there and I'm talking to folks or I'm doing my training is just have people be disciplined when they think about communication. They get that communication mindset. Be strategic. What's the job of my communication? What do I want people to think, feel, and do? How do I tell a story? How do I make sure that I know everything that I'm doing is communicating? How do I know my audience? Because when we don't ask ourselves those questions, that's when the crazy stuff happens and the bad stuff happens. And if it's bad enough, it winds up on social media and all that. And we know how that goes.
Absolutely. All right, Gary, that's a good segue point. So one of the questions I always like to ask is about what living a well-rounded life looks like for you, because this is an entrepreneurship podcast, but one of the biggest hurdles that most people in business, really just most people in general, face at one time or another is living a well-rounded life and doing the things that bring us joy with the people that we care about most. So what does that look like for you in this season that you're in?
Well, I love to travel, and
Me too.
And there are, I learned a while back, there are always reasons not to take a trip.
Yeah.
There's never a perfect time. And after a while, I realized this is not a dress rehearsal. That it is when we want to go do something and enjoy something at a certain time of our lives that we should get everything out of the way and devote the time to do it. And so we've taken some longer trips, in recent years and further trips in recent years, and making sure that we overcome the reasons not to do something. So because they'll always be there.
Yeah.
and say, you know what, this is important enough for us to push everything else out of the way and go ahead and do.
Yeah. And the key there, which you alluded to, is just making it a priority. My wife and I were literally sitting across the table at one of our favorite restaurants having a drink like 2 days ago. And we've been all the last 6 months saying, oh, yeah, we're going to go on this trip in November, December. We're going to make it work. And we finally pulled out our calendars to figure out dates. And we both were, I mean, immediately frustrated because we realized, man, we should have actually planned this 6 months ago, like we talked about, because now and I've got a lot of other priorities that have crept up on the calendar. And we travel a lot. So it's not like this is our one trip of the year, but it was important to us. And now we realize it's like, no, no, we're not making this mistake again. We need to be proactive. This is what really fills us up and helps us show up as our best selves. So to not get to go on this trip, which we'll probably squeeze it in, have to shuffle some things around, but had we been more proactive about it, it would have been a lot more stress free and we wouldn't be kicking ourselves here 6 months later. So
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
And I also like to try as best I can to create boundaries around the workday. We all have to work crazy hours sometimes, especially if work is global and time zones and all that stuff. But I really try to uh, start and end work at specific times of the day. It may not always be the same time every day, and set it aside and have quiet time, stream a show, spend time with my wife.
Yeah.
This time of year, sitting out on the deck and looking at the pond behind our house and the birds and all that stuff. I know, thrilling, right?
It
Really.
sounds lovely. Oh, it sounds so lovely. Yeah, we have
um,
similar. We've got like beautiful like forest behind us with, I mean, sometimes we have bald eagles flying overhead.
oh,
So
it's wonderful.
just
Yeah,
being out there in the afternoon is always very grounding.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's good, we have two boys. They are one is in his second year of his first job out in the world. Our second one is a senior in college, and so uh it's we're definitely moving into that next phase of our lives, and learning how to do things for us, which is good, and while still being able to do meaningful work. So um I don't have all the answers. I try my best
Yeah,
every
no one
day,
does.
just like we all do, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my things that I look at, is just make sure that we realize there's always reasons not to do something, and you got to push those out of the way, and try to, as best you can, to put boundaries around work.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So you said travel was a big one for you. So I have a
Yeah.
choose your own adventure question for you. You can pick which one you'd like to answer or both if you so desire. But one would be, what's just a favorite place you visited in the last, say, 5 years, or just a recent adventure that you went on? Could be with your wife, your family, in your own backyard here in the US. But in either case, like, what was it like? What made it so memorable? Maybe a favorite meal or drink you had, lesson learned, and in very much the theme of the episode, tell us a story.
Yeah, well, when I think of one of my favorite places, and we haven't been there in a while, there is, and don't tell too many people about this.
Yeah.
There's a
Keep on
little
this way.
island. There's a little island off, I think it's the northeast coast of Saint Martin, in the Caribbean, and the island is called Pinel Island, Pinel Island. And the only thing on this island, at least the last time we were there, are two restaurants. And you get out there. There's a little ferry, I think, that they run. But the first time we went out there, we found some guy on the beach in St. Martin, and I think we paid him $10, and we both got on his jet ski, and he took us out there.
Nice.
And we you go out there, and these two restaurants each have some beach chairs, and the restaurants, you sit down, and they bring up the lobsters that they caught that morning, and you pick which one you want. And it's so many euros per kilo, which is way too much math for me on vacation.
Yeah.
So the price
Just
doesn't matter.
take it. Yeah.
And and the view of this island, you're right off the beach of St. Martin, so it's pretty much there. But off in the distance are 2 or 3 other islands, and you're sitting there with this awesome food, and your toes are in the sand, and it's just, I don't know, it's idyllic. It's one of my favorite spots anywhere.
Oh, I love it. I went to St. Martin when I was probably 11 or 12. I was on a cruise with my family. My grandma took the whole family on a cruise together. The only cruise I've ever been on. And that was one of the ports that we stopped in. I remember it was beautiful. Had some great adventures. I think I went snorkeling with my dad for the very first time. So good memories.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. There are other stories in other places. When you start a travel podcast, have me back on.
All right. I'll have to do that. I'll have to do that, Gary. Well, what parting advice or ask do you have for people listening before we wrap things up?
Just think more about your communication. As I had been saying before, be more purposeful about it. Remember that everything that you're saying and doing is communicating one way or another, and make sure that is supporting the way you want to be seen, the way you want to show up, the way you want your organization to show up, and the way that you want your teams to feel about you and your organization, and the way you want them to work. And I can help you sort through that if you'd like. So insidecomms.com is the main website, plus plus.insidecomms.com is the e-learning website. Insidecomms.com is the main site.
Well, we will include links to everything in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you, Gary. This has been great conversation. Communication is so fundamental. So to everyone listening, remember that everything communicates.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
To all of our Adventurous listeners, thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Please be sure to subscribe, download, and share this on social media or with someone you know will get some value from it. Leaving a review goes a long way in helping people find the show, and I personally appreciate reading them when they come in. So please go drop one if you have the time. We'll see you all next week, and remember, whether we're talking about business or the things that bring us joy outside of work, life is meant for exploring. So go out there and live it one adventure at a time.